Up here, beyond the 66th parallel, the world doesn't behave the way you think it does. If you turn away now, you'll miss a side of the Arctic few people ever see. A world that's far more alive than frozen. In this journey, we'll uncover the secrets that shape life in the far north, and then travel through the Arctic's most extraordinary wonders. And the deeper we go, the more you'll see. The Arctic Circle, a line drawn around our planet at roughly 66 degrees, 33 minutes north. Cross it, and everything you know about the world begins to shift. For most of the year, this region experiences what no other place can: a sun that vanishes for months and then refuses to set. In the heart of winter, some towns live in darkness for more than 60 days straight. Yet in summer, daylight never ends. It's a cycle that defines life here. Every animal, every plant, every heartbeat tuned to a rhythm of endless night and endless day. But here's where it gets interesting. Even though the Arctic looks frozen and still, it's one of the most dynamic ecosystems on Earth. Every year, sea ice expands and shrinks with the seasons, breathing in and out like a living lung, sometimes stretching over 14 million square kilometers, that's almost 5.4 million square miles, and then melting back into the ocean when the sun returns. The Arctic is not a continent like Antarctica. It's a vast ocean surrounded by the northern edges of 8 countries: Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Russia, Greenland, Canada, and the United States through Alaska. And that ocean, though covered in ice, hides one of the least explored frontiers on Earth. Scientists estimate that under the Arctic seabed lie enormous reserves of oil and natural gas. But tapping into them could change this region forever. So, the question remains, is it worth disturbing one of the last untouched places on our planet? We'll come back to that later. For now, think about this. The Arctic may look isolated, but it's deeply connected to the rest of the world. What happens here doesn't stay here. When sea ice melts, it changes ocean currents thousands of kilometers away, nearly 6,000 miles, affecting rainfall in Africa, crops in Asia, and even winter storms in Europe. That's why scientists call the Arctic the air conditioner of our planet. But what happens when that air conditioner starts to break? Here's where it gets even more fascinating. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average. Entire landscapes are shifting within a single lifetime. Permafrost, ground that's been frozen for thousands of years, is thawing, releasing methane gas that was locked away since the Ice Age. And as ancient layers melt, they reveal something almost unbelievable. Perfectly preserved mammoths, Ice Age wolves, and even viruses older than humanity itself. But despite the rapid changes, life here has adapted in extraordinary ways. Take the Arctic fox. It can survive temperatures below -50 degrees Celsius, nearly -60 degrees Fahrenheit, and still find food hidden beneath snowdrifts thicker than a meter, about 3 feet. Or the polar bear, the true symbol of the North, able to swim over 100 kilometers, nearly 60 miles, across freezing seas to find its next meal. And then there's the Arctic tern, a bird so small you could hold it in your hand, yet it performs the longest migration of any animal on Earth, traveling from pole to pole every single year, a round trip of more than 70,000 kilometers, almost 44,000 miles. How does something that small survive such a journey? That's one of the many mysteries the Arctic keeps hidden. But the Arctic isn't just about survival, it's about light. In winter, when the sun disappears, the sky begins to glow in color. Charged particles from the sun collide with Earth's atmosphere, painting waves of green, purple, and red across the night sky. It's the aurora borealis, the northern lights, a phenomenon so ancient that Arctic cultures have been telling stories about it for millennia. The Inuit believed the lights were spirits playing a game with a walrus skull. The Sami people of Lapland saw them as souls of the dead, dancing in the heavens. And even today, standing beneath them feels like stepping inside a myth. But here's the part most people don't realize. While the Arctic seems empty, over 4 million people actually live here, from indigenous communities who've thrived for thousands of years, to scientists, fishermen, and explorers who call this place home. They've learned to read the language of the ice, the crackling sound that warns of shifting flows, the wind that carries stories of storms far beyond the horizon. And despite the isolation, Arctic life is filled with color. Bright red cabins against white snow, blue glaciers glowing under the midnight sun, reindeer herds crossing tundra fields that stretch for hundreds of kilometers. It's a world that feels both ancient and alive, fragile and infinite. But here's the loop that few videos ever close. The Arctic isn't just a destination, it's a mirror. Everything that happens here is a reflection of what's happening to our planet as a whole. If you want to understand climate, beauty, resilience, or balance, you find it here, in this frozen frontier. And that brings us to the next part of the journey. Because now that we understand the truths hidden beneath the ice, it's time to see them, to explore the places where the Arctic reveals its soul. The Arctic Circle begins here, where the mountains rise straight out of the sea, and every wave reflects a light you've never seen before. At first glance, the Lofoten Islands look impossible. Sharp granite peaks piercing the clouds, tiny red cottages resting quietly on the edge of the ocean. But what's even harder to believe is that this place, sitting far above the 66th parallel, stays surprisingly mild, warmed by ocean currents that reach all the way from the Caribbean. In winter, the sun barely touches the horizon, painting the sky in blue and gold. In summer, it never sets at all, and under that endless daylight, the islands glow as if time itself has stopped. But here's where it gets interesting. Beneath the beauty lies one of the oldest fishing traditions in the world. For more than 1,000 years, cod from these Arctic waters fed northern Europe, and even now, the scent of dried fish drifts through the icy air. When the wind turns and the sea roars against the rocks, the islands feel alive, ancient, restless, waiting, and what comes next only pushes that feeling deeper. In the Arctic, beauty often hides behind isolation, and nowhere proves that more than Senja. Just north of the Arctic Circle, this island looks like a secret version of Norway itself. Steep fjords, quiet fishing villages, and roads that cling to the cliffs as if carved by the wind. It's often called Norway in miniature because every kind of northern landscape fits here in one place. But there's something strange about Senja's mountains. They rise almost vertically from the sea like teeth of stone, shaped by glaciers that carved through them nearly 10,000 years ago. One of them, Segla, has become a symbol of the Arctic itself, a single blade of rock that towers more than 640 meters, almost 2,100 feet above the ocean. In winter, the island feels otherworldly. The northern lights move across the sky while orcas swim through the fjords, scenes so unreal they seem staged, yet they're not. Senja may feel remote, but it's a reminder that the Arctic isn't empty. It's simply untouched. And as you move farther north, the wilderness begins to reveal its human heart. Known as the gateway to the Arctic, Tromsø sits more than 350 kilometers, 220 miles, above the Arctic Circle, yet it feels surprisingly alive. This is one of the few places on Earth where you can have coffee under the northern lights or sail through polar night while the city glows in soft blue light. What makes Tromsø remarkable isn't just its beauty, it's its balance. For centuries, it's been a meeting point between nature and science, adventure and survival. In the 19th century, Arctic explorers like Roald Amundsen prepared their polar expeditions right here. Today, it's one of the best places on Earth to study the aurora borealis, thanks to a magnetic field that makes the lights dance almost every night in winter. But Tromsø has another secret. Even during months without sunlight, locals stay cheerful, a phenomenon psychologists have studied for years. Their secret? They don't fight the darkness, they celebrate it. And just beyond the city's edge lies a place where that darkness meets the ocean, a landscape that feels like the true end of Europe. When you reach Nordkapp, the North Cape, you're standing at the edge of a continent. This dramatic cliff rises 307 meters, 1,007 feet, above the Barents Sea, marking one of the northernmost points in all of Europe. But here's the surprising part. Nordkapp isn't technically the continent's northernmost point. That title belongs to a small nearby peninsula called Nivskjellodden. Yet Nordkapp became famous first, centuries ago, when English explorer Richard Chancellor reached it in 1553 while searching for a sea route to Asia. Since then, it's been a symbol of the human desire to go farther, even when there's nothing left ahead but ice and wind. Every summer, thousands gather here to watch the midnight sun, a surreal moment when daylight refuses to fade. In winter, it's the opposite. Only aurora lights the sky. Nordkapp reminds us that exploration doesn't always mean discovery. Sometimes, it's simply the act of reaching the edge and realizing there's still more beyond it. And just across the Arctic Ocean, that beyond takes shape in one of the most isolated archipelagos on Earth. Halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole lies Svalbard, a place so remote that polar bears outnumber people. Here, temperatures can drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius, about minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, yet it's home to scientists, miners, and adventurers who live year-round in this frozen wilderness. Svalbard's main town, Longyearbyen, is one of the world's northernmost settlements. Everything here is adapted to the extreme. Buildings stand on stilts so the permafrost doesn't melt beneath them, and there's no sunlight at all from November to January. Yet in summer, the sun circles overhead for 24 hours a day, creating an eerie feeling that time itself has stopped. But Svalbard also guards something extraordinary, the global seed vault, a secure vault carved into the permafrost containing over 1.2 million seed samples from nearly every country on Earth. It's humanity's insurance policy against catastrophe. Still, the real wonder isn't inside the mountain, it's outside. Vast glaciers, blue ice caves, and Arctic foxes that blend perfectly into snow. It's a world that feels almost alien. And yet, somehow, it's still part of ours. And as we cross the sea toward the Scandinavian mainland, the story of the Arctic continues, shaped by the people who learn to live within its light. Deep inside Swedish Lapland lies Kiruna, a city built on iron and ice. It's the northernmost town in Sweden, just 145 kilometers, 90 miles, north of the Arctic Circle. and one of the few places on Earth that's literally moving. Here's why. Beneath the city lies one of the world's largest iron ore mines. Decades of excavation have hollowed out the ground so much that Kiruna is slowly being relocated, building by building, about 3 kilometers, 2 miles to the east. It's one of the biggest urban relocation projects in modern history. But despite its industrial story, Kiruna is surrounded by nature that feels untouched. Frozen lakes, tundra, and reindeer trails leading through endless snow. It's also the home of the Sami people, the indigenous reindeer herders who've lived here for thousands of years. Above Kiruna's night sky, the aurora dances with remarkable intensity, so strong that scientists set up the Esrange Space Center nearby to study the upper atmosphere. And just beyond the city, where science meets art, the Arctic takes on a whole new form. In a small village near the Torn River stands something that shouldn't exist, a hotel made entirely of snow and ice. The Jukkasjärvi Icehotel was first built in 1989, and since then, it's been rebuilt every winter, sculpted anew from 5,000 tons of ice and 30,000 tons of snow. Each room is unique, designed by artists from around the world. Even the chandeliers and glasses in the bar are carved from frozen river water. When temperatures rise in spring, the entire structure melts back into the river, only to be reborn the next winter. But here's the part most visitors don't realize. The Ice Hotel also runs a year-round version, kept frozen by solar energy, proof that even in the Arctic, sustainability can be creative. The air here feels still, the light blue and silver. Sleeping inside is like resting inside a sculpture. And once you step outside, into the sharp air of the Arctic morning, you realize this region doesn't just endure the cold, it reinvents it. The journey continues deeper into the wild, to a land where mountains, lakes, and sky merge into one seamless horizon. Tucked within the Scandinavian mountains lies Abisko National Park, one of the best places on Earth to witness the northern lights. It sits about 250 kilometers, 155 miles, north of the Arctic Circle, surrounded by frozen waterfalls, deep valleys, and the vast Tornatresk Lake. But what makes Abisko truly special is its microclimate. The surrounding mountains create a blue hole, a pocket of clear skies that makes this area one of the most reliable spots for aurora viewing anywhere on the planet. The park is also the starting point of the Kungsleden, or King's Trail, a legendary long-distance hiking route stretching 440 kilometers, 270 miles, through Arctic wilderness. Along the way, you can find Arctic foxes, moose, and in spring, fields of wildflowers. But Abisko isn't just about what you see, it's about what you feel. Silence, space, and time slowing to the rhythm of the north. And just beyond the mountains, the Arctic Circle continues, crossing invisible borders into a land shared by reindeer and snow. Lapland is not a country, but a vast region that stretches across four: Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. It covers over 400,000 square kilometers, or nearly 155,000 square miles. And yet fewer than 200,000 people live here. That's about one person for every 2 square kilometers. This is the land of the Sami, Europe's only indigenous people, whose history goes back more than 10,000 years. They've lived alongside reindeer for millennia, moving with the seasons, following migration routes older than any border. Even today, reindeer herding remains a central part of Sami life, protected by law and tradition. Lapland also reveals something extraordinary about the Arctic. Despite its extreme conditions, it's full of life. Birch forests thrive near the tree line, rivers cut through tundra, and in summer, sunlight lasts for 70 days straight. During winter, the same rivers freeze into glowing ribbons of blue ice. But Lapland isn't frozen in time. It's adapting. From eco-lodges powered by geothermal energy to Sami communities teaching ancient skills online, this is a region that blends old wisdom with modern survival. And further south, one city has turned Arctic mythology into something magical. Right on the line of the Arctic Circle lies Rovaniemi, a city that proves the Arctic can be playful too. This is the official home of Santa Claus, where you can literally cross the Arctic Circle marked on the ground, 66 degrees 33 minutes north. But Rovaniemi's story isn't just about Christmas. After World War II, the city was almost completely destroyed, and its modern layout was designed in the shape of a reindeer's head, a symbol of hope and renewal. Architect Alvar Aalto, one of Finland's most famous designers, created this blueprint, making Rovaniemi both a cultural and symbolic landmark. Here, the Arctic meets imagination. Reindeer sleighs, glass igloos under the aurora, and ice restaurants that melt away each spring. Yet just outside the tourist center, nature dominates: pine forests, frozen rivers, and silence stretching for miles. Rovaniemi also houses the Arcticum Museum, dedicated to Arctic science and Sami culture. It reminds visitors that the Arctic isn't just a winter fantasy. It's a living, changing world. And north of here, that world turns even quieter, where the forest gives way to endless tundra. Further north, the forests thin and the horizon opens wide. This is Saariselkä, a highland region within the Arctic Circle, surrounded by fells, frozen lakes, and wilderness as far as the eye can see. It's one of Finland's oldest tourist destinations, known for its crystal-clear air and winter nights filled with northern lights. But here's what most people don't know. Saariselkä is built on ancient ground, part of the Scandinavian Shield, one of the oldest geological formations on Earth, dating back more than 2.5 billion years. The landscape itself is a fossil, shaped by glaciers, wind, and time. Today, it's a hub for Arctic research and adventure alike. Skiers glide under pink skies, while scientists study how reindeer navigate during polar night. And just beyond Saariselkä lies the gateway to one of Finland's largest protected areas, a wilderness that reveals how life survives in near silence. At the very heart of Finnish Lapland lies Urho Kekkonen National Park, one of the largest protected wilderness areas in Europe. It stretches over 2,550 square kilometers. That's nearly 1,000 square miles of pure Arctic landscape, fells, forests, and tundra that seem untouched by time. Named after Finland's longest-serving president, the park was established in 1983 to preserve not just nature, but traditional Sami livelihoods. Reindeer still roam freely across these lands, and you can even follow their tracks along old migration routes that cross from valley to valley. But the park hides something few visitors expect: ancient signs of human life. Archaeologists have found Stone Age settlements here, some more than 6,000 years old, proving that people have survived in this climate for longer than almost anywhere else in Northern Europe. Today, hikers come to reach summits like Kilopea Fell, where the air feels impossibly clear. And as you leave this wilderness behind, the Arctic grows harsher, its beauty turning from gentle to wild. On Russia's Kola Peninsula, within the Arctic Circle, rise the Khibiny Mountains, the highest range in northwest Russia, though their peaks reach only about 1,200 meters, roughly 3,900 feet. What makes them remarkable isn't their height, but their age. These mountains are among the oldest on Earth, born nearly 400 million years ago, older than the Ural Mountains themselves. The Khibiny are rich in rare minerals. In the early 20th century, scientists discovered over 500 unique mineral types here, some found nowhere else on the planet. The nearby town of Kirovsk was built to mine this treasure, but the Khibiny still holds secrets, caves, frozen lakes, and fossils that tell the story of Earth before mammals existed. In summer, alpine flowers grow just meters from patches of snow that never melt. In winter, it becomes a landscape of silence, snow so fine it glitters like salt, broken only by the sound of skis or wind. The Khibiny Mountains mark a shift in the Arctic's character, from the Nordic calm to the raw wilderness of Russia's far north. And where the mountains end, the Arctic Ocean begins. At the edge of the Barents Sea lies Teriberka, a small fishing village that became famous almost by accident. It sits on Russia's Arctic coast, more than 120 kilometers, 75 miles, northeast of Murmansk, exposed to icy winds that sweep straight from the pole. For decades, Teriberka was fading, a ghost village left behind by the Soviet collapse. Then, in 2014, A Russian film called Leviathan was shot here, and suddenly, the world saw it. Abandoned boats, empty houses, and wild cliffs became symbols of the Arctic's beauty and fragility. But Teriberka isn't just desolation. In recent years, life has returned. Small guest houses, aurora tours, and even a winter kite ski festival. Whales often pass offshore, and in summer, waterfalls tumble directly into the Arctic Ocean. Still, what captures most visitors isn't what's been rebuilt, it's what remains. The sound of wind through old hulls, the frozen shore, and the endless horizon. And beyond that horizon lies the next frontier, where Europe gives way to the North Atlantic and a new island world emerges. A narrow strip of land, just 40 kilometers, 25 miles, off Iceland's northern coast, marks something extraordinary. This is the only part of Iceland that actually crosses the Arctic Circle. The invisible line cuts right through Grímsey Island, a windswept world of cliffs, seabirds, and silence. Only about 60 people live here, yet millions of birds fill the skies each summer: puffins, kittiwakes, and Arctic terns. The terns, small as a hand, migrate farther than any creature on Earth, from the Arctic to Antarctica and back again, a 70,000 kilometer, 44,000 mile round trip. For travelers, Grímsey offers a rare moment: the chance to literally step across the Arctic Circle. There's even a monument, a massive stone sphere that shifts slightly each year as the planet's axial tilt changes. The island's cliffs rise nearly 100 meters, 330 feet, above the ocean, battered by wind and light that constantly reshape the colors of the sea. Grímsey feels like a threshold, a doorway between Iceland's volcanic world and the frozen Arctic beyond. And that frozen world begins with ice that moves, breathes, and cracks like a living thing. Few places on Earth show the power of ice, like Ilulissat. This UNESCO World Heritage Site on Greenland's west coast is home to one of the fastest moving glaciers in the world, Kekkonen. It advances at an incredible 40 meters, 130 feet, every single day, calving icebergs so massive they can rise 100 meters, 330 feet, above the water. Each year, this single glacier produces about 10% of all icebergs that drift into the North Atlantic, including the one believed to have sunk the Titanic. Standing on the cliffs above the fjord, you can hear the ice groan and crack like thunder. It's both terrifying and beautiful, a glimpse into the planet's heartbeat. Scientists study Ilulissat to understand how glaciers respond to rising temperatures. What they've found is astonishing. The glacier's retreat here helps predict how fast sea levels could rise worldwide. Yet, for the people who live nearby, the fjord isn't a symbol of danger. It's part of daily life. Fishermen still navigate between drifting icebergs, as they've done for generations. And just beyond this icy horizon lies Greenland's quiet capital, where modern life meets ancient ice. Nuuk, Greenland's capital, feels more like a frontier outpost than a city. Yet it's home to nearly 1/3 of the country's population. Perched on the country's southwest coast, it lies just below the Arctic Circle, surrounded by mountains and fjords that stretch endlessly into the distance. What makes Nuuk remarkable is how it balances two worlds: Inuit heritage and modern independence. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but it governs itself, and Nuuk is at the center of that story. Colorful wooden houses line the coast, facing a landscape that changes every season, from bright summer light to months of polar twilight. Here, ancient traditions like kayaking and seal hunting coexist with a growing art and music scene. The Greenland National Museum preserves mummified remains from over 500 years ago, discovered perfectly intact in the ice, silent witnesses to Arctic life long before European explorers arrived. Nuuk is proof that even at the edge of the world, life doesn't just survive, it evolves. And as we move farther west, across the sea, we reach the final chapter of the Arctic Circle, where the wilderness meets the wildlife. On the western edge of Hudson Bay, where tundra meets frozen sea, stands Churchill, often called the polar bear capital of the world. This small town of barely 900 people sits more than 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles, north of Winnipeg, yet it welcomes travelers from around the world each autumn for a sight found almost nowhere else. As the bay begins to freeze in late October, hundreds of polar bears gather along the coast, waiting for the ice to return so they can hunt seals. It's one of nature's most powerful migrations, a reminder that, here in the Arctic, survival is timed by the rhythm of the sea. But Churchill is more than its bears. In summer, beluga whales fill the river, and thousands of birds nest across the tundra. The northern lights shimmer over old radar domes, and every gust of wind seems to carry a story of explorers, Inuit hunters, and scientists studying the changing climate. From Norway's storm-carved islands to Canada's icy plains, the Arctic Circle isn't just a place on a map. It's a living system that ties every ocean and every climate together. It teaches us that cold isn't lifeless, that isolation isn't emptiness, and that balance, like ice, can shift silently until it's gone. We've seen landscapes that rewrite what we think is possible, and people who've learned to thrive where nature sets the hardest rules. The Arctic isn't the end of the world. It's the mirror of our world, showing us what resilience, beauty, and change truly mean. And the deeper we go into its silence, the more we realize. The story of the Arctic Circle is also the story of us all.